Beneath the dazzling spotlight of the royal stage, where carefully crafted images and polished words reign supreme, lies a darker truth few dare to confront. It is the cold and calculating silence of King Charles III during the darkest years of Princess Diana's life. She was once the symbol of compassion, a woman with a heart full of love and sincerity, yet also the most wounded by the indifference of the very man who once promised to cherish her. Despite knowing the pain Diana endured, the public betrayal, the relentless pressure from the media, the suffocating isolation within the royal household, the king remained disturbingly quiet. Not a word of defense, not a gesture of comfort. Not once did he stand up when she was hunted like prey by the press. Was it the restraint of a monarch bound by duty? Or was it the true reflection of a heart incapable of empathy? That question has lingered in the minds of many for decades. Because it was that very silence that slowly pushed Diana toward the edge of despair. And even now, long after her tragic death, people continue to ask the same haunting question. If he had spoken up just once, if he had chosen her instead of hiding behind protocol, would her story have ended differently? In the end, silence can be more deafening than any scream. And King Charles's silence may have said far more than words ever could. From the very beginning, Princess Diana was at a disadvantage in her love story, not because she lacked beauty, intelligence, or grace, but because the heart of the man she loved then, Prince Charles, never truly belonged to her. In fact, before their relationship ever began, Diana's place in Charles's life was already overshadowed by someone else, and that someone was none other than her own sister, Lady Sarah Spencer. Few people know that in 1977, when Charles was in his late 20s and under increasing pressure to find a suitable bride, he had a brief romance with Lady Sarah Spencer, Diana's older sister. Sarah, 22 at the time, was elegant, confident, and well-connected in aristocratic circles. At first, their relationship drew curiosity and approval from the public. Some even speculated that Sarah would one day become queen. But everything changed when she made a single remark that would prove to be fatal to her royal prospects. During a media interview, Sarah boldly declared, "I wouldn't marry Charles if he were the dustman or the King of England." Though it may have been meant to convey her independence, the comment was seen as a serious affront to the crown. Almost instantly, her standing in the eyes of the royal family collapsed. Prince Charles ended the relationship without a public explanation. And while one door slammed shut for Sarah, another strange and fateful quietly opened for her younger sister, Diana. That same year, Charles visited the Spencer estate and happened to meet Diana, who was just 16 at the time. To him, she was initially nothing more than the younger sister of an old flame, shy, polite, with a dreamy look in her eyes. But to the royal establishment, Diana checked every She was aristocratic, young, virginal, and scandal-free. In other words, she was perfect. From that point on, Diana was quietly drawn into the royal orbit, but not through grand romance or intimate letters. Rather, through staged appearances, subtle grooming, and cold calculations. She wasn't pursued by a man deeply in love, but selected as a suitable match for the future king, someone who could fulfill the public role, preserve the image of the monarchy, and bear heirs without creating controversy. Even more chilling was Charles's own words during a pre-wedding interview. When asked if he was in love, he replied with a smile, "Whatever in love means." A haunting response, especially for the young bride-to-be, who had hoped for a marriage built on love. For Diana, that was the first loud warning bell that what she was stepping into wasn't a love story, but a carefully arranged alliance. Even during the courtship, Diana sensed something was wrong. Charles was distant, formal, and emotionally guarded. His continued involvement with Camilla Parker Bowles, a woman he had loved long before Diana entered the picture, left no doubt in Diana's mind that she was competing with a ghost that had never left. The night before their wedding, Diana discovered a bracelet Charles had commissioned for Camilla, engraved with the letters G and FR, their secret nicknames for each other. That discovery broke her heart. But by then, the royal machinery was already in motion, and turning back was no longer an option. The tragedy is that the pain didn't begin at the altar. It began years earlier, the moment Diana realized she was not and would never be the woman Charles truly loved. And what made that pain even sharper was knowing that the woman Charles once courted, before Camilla regained prominence, had been her own sister. The relationship between Charles and Diana was never born of deep emotional connection. It was manufactured by expectations, designed to protect the monarchy, and sustained by public illusion. Diana, through no fault of her own, became the perfect facade a princess made for the cameras, not for the man beside her. Charles never chose Diana out of love. He chose her because she was young, impressionable, and acceptable to the royal family. She was, in many ways, the safe option, the one who would not question the rules, not disrupt the image, and not challenge the throne. But what the palace didn't count on was Diana's humanity, her vulnerability, her honesty, and her desperate longing for affection. That longing turned to sorrow. That sorrow turned to silence. And that silence, over time, turned into a quiet rebellion. But all of it began in the earliest days, when Diana was still just a teenager falling for a man who had once loved her sister and who would never be able to love her the way she deserved. In the end, Diana's greatest misfortune may not have been the royal marriage or the ruthless media. It was entering a relationship where love had already been spent. Expectations were suffocating, and her own heart was never truly safe. She stepped into a role already shadowed by another woman's past, and tragically, she would never fully step out of that shadow. Right from the very beginning of her marriage, Diana felt as if she were living in a gilded cage. The royal wedding, watched by millions, seemed to mark the start of a perfect life for a modern-day princess. But the truth unraveled quickly and cruelly. Behind the grand ceremony lay a reality that left her breathless with heartbreak. Prince Charles's heart had never truly belonged to her. Diana once said she felt like an outsider in her own life. Not after years of marriage, but from the very start. The lingering and ambiguous relationship between Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles had never truly ended. Camilla's presence never faded. It lingered in Charles's gaze, in his hidden gifts, and in whispered phone calls late at night. Even during their honeymoon, Diana discovered the first painful signs. A pair of cufflinks engraved with intertwined C initials, Charles and Camilla were worn by Charles as a quiet but cruel message that their bond had not ended. It was not a careless gesture. It was a chilling declaration Diana might be the legal wife, but Camilla held his heart. Ironically, Diana didn't just marry the future king. She walked into a marriage where she was the third person. Charles never paused to protect her from the emotional wreckage. Instead, he let her struggle with gut feelings that slowly uncovered a series of betrayals, handwritten letters, secret jewelry, conveniently overlapping travel schedules with Camilla. Diana began to feel like an actress trapped in a staged performance. She smiled beside a man she knew was in love with someone else. At royal dinners, her eyes searched for truth in his, but again and again she found indifference. She tried to be perfect, hoping to win his affection. But the harder she tried, the clearer it became she was fighting a shadow she could never defeat. Camilla didn't need to be around Charles every day to own his mind. She lived in his thoughts, in his reactions, in the way he spoke. When Diana expressed her hurt, Charles often dismissed her as overly emotional or dramatic. There were no apologies, no comfort. In his eyes, Camilla understood him more. Camilla was the one who didn't cause problems like Diana did. Diana wasn't betrayed once. She was betrayed daily in actions and in silence. These weren't secret affairs behind locked doors. They were open, almost defiant betrayals. Camilla appeared at events Charles attended, shared mutual friends, joined his shooting parties, and sat at formal dinners. Diana knew. Everyone knew. But no one said a word. No one stood up for her. The pain Diana endured didn't stem solely from being cheated on. It came from being abandoned emotionally by everyone around her. In a marriage, couples survive trials by turning toward each other. But Diana found herself alone, uncovering painful truths piece by piece. And when the puzzle was finally complete, she realized something even more brutal. She may have never been truly chosen by Charles at all. Charles didn't marry her out of love. He married her under pressure. She was the suitable royal bride, the perfect public image. Meanwhile, Camilla, though lacking an official title, had always held the irreplaceable place in his heart. Diana wasn't just betrayed. She had been deceived from the very beginning. She began to question everything, the vows they exchanged, the kisses in public, the whispered promises. How much had been real, and how much just a performance to preserve the image of the monarchy? She realized she had lost more than a husband. She had lost faith in love, in marriage, in the life she thought she would build. The final blow came when she realized that she could no longer compete, not because Camilla was better or more beautiful, but because Charles had never opened his heart to anyone else. Diana had entered a marriage already crowded with two people. She became the unwilling lead in a tragedy written by none other than her own husband. After enduring the heartbreak of betrayal from her husband, Diana hoped she could still find refuge within the royal family. She thought that perhaps, even if she could not have Charles's full heart, she would at least be embraced by his family. She imagined a new beginning surrounded by those who would support and love her as one of their own. But what awaited her was not warmth or inclusion. It was a chilling silence. Diana had stepped into a gilded world, only to find herself trapped in a palace of isolation. From the first days within the royal household, Diana began to sense something was deeply wrong. The long corridors, the thick walls, the whispers behind her back, and the endless watchful eyes made her feel as though she was living under constant surveillance. She had not married into a family, but into an institution. Every glance, every gesture, every word was measured and analyzed. She was not a person to them. She was a symbol to be managed. The rules were unspoken but rigid. She was told how to speak, how to dress, when to smile, and when to remain silent. Even how she held her children in public was judged. The warmth and spontaneity she had always carried with her became liabilities. To survive, she had to suppress her emotions and play a part that had been scripted long before she arrived. But Diana was never made for silence. Her isolation grew with each passing day. The palace staff, loyal to traditions older than memory, treated her with formal distance. Even members of the royal family kept her at arm's length. Queen Elizabeth remained composed but distant. Charles became increasingly absent, retreating further into his old affections. Camilla remained a ghost that never disappeared. At royal gatherings, Diana often felt she was being observed like a curiosity, not embraced like a daughter. She cried in private, surrounded by marble and gold. No one asked if she was all right. No one offered comfort. She turned to her diary to pour out the emotions she was forbidden to express. The pages of her journals became her only friends, the only place where she could be truly herself. As the weight of the isolation took its toll, Diana began to suffer from bulimia. It was not just a medical condition. It was a cry for help, a desperate attempt to control something in a life that had spiraled beyond her reach. She would eat until she could no longer feel, and then force herself to be sick. She was punishing her body for the pain her heart could not express. But the palace did not treat it as an emergency. They saw it as a weakness, something to be hidden, not healed. She wandered the gardens alone, silent and pale. She would sit for hours by the window, staring into the distance. Her vibrant spirit faded as she became a prisoner in a world that did not care if she broke. She wore a perfect smile for the cameras, but her eyes told the truth. She was disappearing in plain sight. Even her attempts to reach out for help were twisted against her. When she opened up to the press, they said she was disloyal. When she wept in public, They called her unstable. When she pleaded for support, she was told to keep quiet for the sake of the crown. And yet, no one asked why a woman so loved by the public felt so abandoned within her own home. The betrayal Diana endured was not only from her husband, it was from a system that had no room for emotion, no space for individuality. It wanted a princess, but not the woman behind the title. Her truth was inconvenient. Her suffering was a threat. Her honesty was considered dangerous. In moments of despair, Diana described herself as a bird trapped in a golden cage. She had everything and yet nothing. The titles, the jewels, the global fame could not fill the void of being unloved and unheard. She had entered the palace with hope, but she was met with walls that would not let her in. No one screamed at her. No one shoved her out. But through silence, through absence, through indifference, they told her she did not belong. And in that silence, Diana began to vanish. Not in the eyes of the world, but within the very walls that should have protected her. If betrayal from her husband had broken Diana's heart, then it was the media that shattered her soul piece by piece, day by day, hour by hour. It wasn't a knife in the back. It was 1,000 camera flashes in her face without warning and without mercy. From the moment she entered the royal family, Diana lost something every human being needs in order to live privacy. She was no longer just a woman. She became an icon, the headline of every front page. Not because she asked for it, but because the world demanded it. Every time she stepped outside her door, whether to take her children to school or to walk through the gardens of Kensington Palace, Diana was surrounded by cameras. Dozens, sometimes hundreds of paparazzi followed her relentlessly. They didn't care if she was exhausted or if her smile was strained through tears. All they cared about was whether their photo would sell better than the next. Diana once said, "I was the most valuable asset they had." And she was right. She was not just a fashion icon, the mother of a future king, or a symbol of compassion. To the media, she was gold. A glance, a wardrobe slip, a strange look in a crowd, everything was enough to spark a media storm. The cruelty of the press wasn't just in reporting the news, it was in creating it. When Diana stayed silent, they called her cold. When she spoke, they said she was divisive. When she smiled, they accused her of being fake. When she cried, they said she was dramatic. There was no winning in this game. The rules did not exist. And the only ones allowed to win were the tabloids. Diana was not just photographed, she was hunted, stalked, and chased like prey. Photographers climbed walls, broke into hospitals when she gave birth, and hid across rooftops to capture a glimpse of her holding her children without makeup. They didn't see it as an invasion. They saw it as a payday. What was worse, this intrusion didn't stop at her doorstep. It wormed its way into her private life, twisting even the purest relationships. When Diana tried to become independent after the divorce, the media did not celebrate her growth. They pointed their lenses at every man who stood near her and branded them all as new lovers. Every time she smiled at a doctor, a trainer, a friend, headlines screamed Diana in love again. But was she really in love, or was she just trying to breathe in a world that never let her be? She tried to speak for herself, most notably in the BBC interview in 1995. But instead of gaining understanding, she only awakened the beast. The press wanted more. They demanded more public appearances, more personal stories, more tears. They turned her pain into a product, and the world, while loving her, unknowingly fueled the cruelty with every click and every page turn. After her divorce, Diana hoped for peace, but peace was never on the menu. The media wouldn't let her fade away. They wanted to know where she lived, what she ate, and who she was with. On vacations, helicopters hovered above. Every bikini photo was a media war, and the only loser was Diana. Even on the last day of her life, the rules hadn't changed. The car that carried her and Dodi Al-Fayed wasn't fleeing from assassins. It was fleeing from flashing lights and endless lenses. And when that car crashed in the Alma Tunnel, it ended everything. Yet even in her dying moments, the cameras didn't stop. They clicked, they recorded, they watched her die. The ones who killed her didn't use weapons. They used headlines, cameras, and indifference. They weren't in the tunnel that night, but they were the reason she had to run. She had never lived a day truly for herself, and even in death, she was on the front page one last time. The most painful question of all is, did we, the ones who claimed to love Diana, ever really protect her? Or was it our curiosity, our appetite for gossip, our need to know just one more thing that truly pushed her to the edge after the pain of betrayal from the very man who once vowed to protect and accompany her for life? Princess Diana still refused to fall because she was not only a wounded wife, but also a mother. And that title, more than anything else, kept her going through the darkest moments of her life. Diana's broken heart held together only because of her two young sons, William and Harry. From the very moment she became a mother, Diana was determined that her children would not grow up as lonely princes bound by the cold framework of royal tradition. She chose to raise them with real love, rather than strict protocol passed down through generations. But being a mother in the royal household was unlike being a mother anywhere else. It was a silent battle where every tender gesture, every outing to the park, every meal she prepared was scrutinized and judged. Diana wanted her children to be hugged, to laugh and cry freely, to feel their mother near them without being governed by a rigid royal schedule. But such warmth clashed with tradition. Many within the palace thought she was breaking rules, being too emotional, too unconventional. What they didn't understand was that for a woman who was losing everything, her marriage, her trust, her peace of mind, those moments with her sons were the only proof that she still had meaning. While the nation admired the beautiful princess who always wore a warm smile, few realized that behind the spotlight was a mother constantly struggling to raise her children her way. Every time she appeared in public, Diana had to transform into a flawless, symbol, graceful, gentle, elegant. But this perfection came at a cost. She was not allowed to show exhaustion, to fall apart, to simply be human. Her schedule was a non-stop cycle. Mornings filled with official duties, afternoons packed with charity visits, evenings with royal banquets. And after the lights went out, the only time she truly had for herself was when she tiptoed into her children's rooms and kissed them goodnight. Some days, Diana saw her sons for only a few hours. Other times, just a few stolen minutes. The hurried hugs in the corridors of Kensington Palace were sometimes all she could give. The more she tried to balance royal duty and motherhood, the more exhausted she became. Diana often suffered from insomnia, poor appetite, and emotional instability. But instead of receiving compassion, she was judged. The press painted her as weak and unstable. The media remained relentless, scrutinizing every detail of her role as a mother. People thought being a princess meant living in luxury. But for Diana, that luxury was a gilded cage, a cage that trapped her emotions and denied her authenticity. Being a mother in that world was like walking a tightrope where every step could spark scandal. What hurt Diana the most was the realization that no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shield her children from the pressures of real life in the relentless gaze of the press. From a very young age, William and Harry were followed by cameras, shaped by expectations, and written into headlines long before they understood what was happening. Diana felt helpless. She knew the suffocating weight of public scrutiny, and she didn't want her children to experience the same. But she was a lone mother fighting against a powerful system where love often came second to image and power. She once confided in a friend, "I don't care if they think I'm a good wife or not, but I must be a good mother." And no matter the kid, Diana kept that promise. Despite criticism, warnings, and isolation, she poured her entire heart into William and Harry. No one counted the times she secretly drove them to school, ignoring security protocols, No one knew how many nights she tiptoed into their rooms just to hold them close. These moments weren't captured by any camera, but they are what defined her love. Diana may not have been the perfect princess in the eyes of the palace, but she was the perfect mother in the eyes of her sons. And perhaps that is her greatest legacy, a love that never wavered, a heart that never gave up, even in the stormy halls of royalty. There were three of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. That quote from Princess Diana was not just a confession, but a cry of pain that had been suppressed for years. Behind the elegant appearance and gentle smile seen in royal photographs was a woman trying to hold together the shattered pieces of her life with silence. Diana knew full well that the man she called her husband had long since given his heart to someone else, and tragically, that someone was not a distant memory, but a constant presence within the palace walls. Camilla Parker Bowles. From the very beginning of the marriage, Diana sensed that she was never the only one. The secret phone calls, the indifferent glances, the recurring coldness made it clear that love, if it had ever existed, had turned into obligation. But she was not allowed to show it. As the wife of Prince Charles and mother to the future king, Diana was expected to walk in glass slippers, pretending everything was perfect even as her soul bled with each passing day. Countless photos were released of the happy royal family, the hand-holding of all, the shared smiles, the gazes exchanged in public gave the illusion of a fairy tale romance. But it was all a performance, a play repeated at official events, on royal tours, and during national celebrations. Behind the curtain, Diana was just a lonely woman trapped in a lifeless marriage with a man who slept beside her but no longer belonged to her. No one could imagine the burden Diana carried. Every morning she had to put on a cheerful face before stepping out of the palace. She had to smile while standing next to a husband whose mind and heart were elsewhere. She had to wave to the public while her own heart was breaking. And most of all, she had to play the role of the ideal wife under the watchful gaze of millions, even though what she lived was nothing more than a loveless charade. Diana was not only living in deception, she was forced to become a part of it. She had to appear with Charles at major royal events. She had to memorize the lines of a harmonious couple during interviews. Even when Charles's eyes constantly drifted away, she had to maintain grace, for the sake of the monarchy's image. To the world, perfection was required. To Diana, it was a life sentence without appeal. Worse still, she had no one to confide in. Inside the palace, she was an outsider. The whispers behind her back, the judgmental stares, the formal greetings without warmth made her feel more and more isolated. Even when she turned to her husband to express her fears, she was met with silence or, worse, denial. Being betrayed hurt, but being dismissed as if her feelings didn't exist was even more cruel. Diana once said she felt like a decoration in Charles's life. She was there to beautify, to create a perfect picture, but no one actually listened to her heart. And so, after every glamorous event came long, lonely nights in a cold room, Diana was not the Princess of Wales, not the beloved icon of Britain, but a forsaken wife trying to understand why love had become a prison with no escape. Yet the most painful part was not the betrayal itself, it was pretending not to know. Diana was fully aware Charles was still in contact with Camilla, aware of the gifts, the secret rendezvous, the stolen glances, but she could do nothing. If she spoke up, she would be accused of damaging the royal image. If she stayed silent, she would continue to be the victim of a cruel game called duty. Either way, she was destined to lose. Their marriage had died long ago, yet it was kept alive through rituals, joint appearances, and forced smiles. Diana felt suffocated in a world where truth was forbidden and emotions were a luxury. She once hoped that she could save the relationship for the sake of her children, her dignity, and herself. But the more she tried, the more it drained her. In the end, she chose to leave Choemon. A decision not made lightly, For it was not merely a divorce but a bold statement against the very system that had broken her. Diana was no longer the ideal wife in the monarchy's eyes, but she became a symbol of courage to millions around the world. Because she dared to let go of the sham, dared to reject the lies, and dared to speak truths that many wanted buried. Her life afterward was not peaceful, but at least it was her own. In that journey, she was no longer a princess lost in illusion, but a real woman hurt, brave, and finally free. Divorce, a short word, yet one that carries immense weight, especially when it happens inside the British royal family, where nothing is truly private, where love is entangled with duty, and where image is everything. When Princess Diana and Prince Charles officially divorced, the world did not simply witness the end of a marriage. It watched the collapse of a fairy tale it had once believed in. From the moment Diana walked down the aisle in that unforgettable gown, she became the people's princess. Millions adored her, admired her grace, and believed she had found her prince. But behind the tiaras and titles was a woman who struggled, who suffered, and who ultimately had the courage to walk away. It wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the loss of a role, a title, and a dream that millions had pinned their hopes on. In the final months before the divorce was finalized, Diana faced relentless pressure from every direction. The media hounded her day and night, dissecting her every word, her every appearance. Headlines questioned her motives. Was she giving up too soon? Why couldn't she try harder? No one seemed to understand the truth that the real strength sometimes lies in letting go, even when the world begs you to hold on. Inside the palace, she was met with cold stares and polite silence. Once hailed as the perfect royal wife, she now stood alone. Her decision was seen as an act of rebellion. But Diana knew that continuing to live in a loveless marriage was the real danger to herself, her children, and even the monarchy. The divorce also meant giving up the title of Her Royal Highness, a painful reminder that she was no longer part of the inner royal circle. She had gone from the center of global attention to a woman fighting to keep her dignity. Diana, Princess of Wales, was still beloved, but the palace had drawn a line, and crossing that line came at a cost. Public opinion was divided. Many saw her as a brave woman, standing up for herself and her children. Others questioned her decisions, wondering if she was chasing sympathy or attention. Diana knew she would never again be just a private citizen. Her every move, her every word, would continue to be under a microscope. Perhaps the greatest heartbreak of all was for her children. Diana once admitted she tried to save the marriage not for love, but for William and Harry. She wanted them to grow up in a stable family, shielded from the chaos that swirled around her. But she also knew that sacrificing her own well-being would eventually destroy her ability to be the mother they needed. Choosing freedom, even at a great cost, was her way of protecting them. After the divorce, Diana appeared more confident, more determined. She was no longer the timid girl who had entered the royal family 2 decades earlier. She had found her voice, and with it came a sense of liberation. Yet even as she smiled in public, the scars remained. The fairy tale had ended, and reality was far from kind. The divorce of Charles and Diana marked a turning point in royal history. It shattered the illusion of perfection and forced the monarchy to confront a more modern reality. Diana may have stepped away from the crown, but she walked straight into the hearts of millions. She wasn't a princess from a storybook anymore. She was something more powerful, a symbol of resilience. Tragically, just as she was beginning to live life on her own terms, Diana's story ended too soon. Her death shocked the world and sparked endless speculation. Some believed that, had she remained within the palace walls, she might still be alive. But Diana refused to be caged, and that defiance is part of why she is remembered so vividly. Through her painful divorce, Diana showed that even in the face of intense public scrutiny and institutional pressure, a woman could choose herself. She gave up everything the world thought she needed: titles, status, and power to reclaim her peace. In doing so, she gave a voice to every woman who had ever felt silenced, overlooked, or trapped. Her story is not just about heartbreak, it is about courage. Diana's decision to divorce wasn't a failure. It was a revolution, a quiet, elegant rebellion against a system that had tried to define her. And in that rebellion, she found her legacy. She lost the palace, but she gained the world. The world once believed that after a tearful marriage with Prince Charles, Princess Diana would finally find the light at the end of the tunnel. But ironically, it was in an actual tunnel in Paris where that light was extinguished forever. She left this world without ever truly living the life she yearned for, a life of freedom, genuine love, and peace from a constant scrutiny, all simply because she had once been royal. After the high-profile divorce, Diana began a new chapter. Gone were the stiff protocols, the forced smiles in front of cameras. She immersed herself in humanitarian work, traveled to the most troubled corners of the globe, comforted orphans, and sat beside AIDS patients when no one else dared to. To the public, she seemed reborn, radiant, and liberated. But behind the smile still lingered a shadow. Every man who came into Diana's life was chased by the tabloids. A rumor, a blurry photo, a holiday trip, anything could become headline news. Diana was never allowed to love in peace. Her emotions were public property, dragged into the spotlight and picked apart until nothing private remained. Amid the noise and speculation, only one man was publicly acknowledged: Dodi Al-Fayed, the son of billionaire Mohammed Al-Fayed. Unlike royalty, Dodi offered something Diana had longed for: affection without pretense. Together, they laughed, embraced, and shared quiet moments. No titles, no crowns, just two souls trying to build something real. For a brief moment, Diana tasted a life untouched by duty. But that fragile happiness was short-lived. On the night of August 31st, 1990, a speeding car crashed inside the Alma Tunnel in Paris. The fairy tale ended in an instant. Diana died on the way to the hospital. The world stood still. How could someone so full of life, so iconic, vanish like this? The questions multiplied. Was the driver really drunk? Were they fleeing from paparazzi? Or something more sinister? Was there someone who never wanted Diana to live freely? She had told close friends she felt watched. She had once written, "If anything happens to me, don't believe it's just an accident." That note became a haunting puzzle piece, adding fuel to the flames of conspiracy. Diana's death wasn't just a personal tragedy for Princes William and Harry. It was a global loss. Millions wept. Flowers flooded the gates of Kensington Palace. The world mourned not just a princess, but a beacon of compassion and defiance. She broke royal tradition, not out of rebellion, but to stay human. Her sons lost not only their mother, but their sanctuary. Diana shielded them from royal coldness, took them to fast food joints, parks, and homeless shelters. She wanted them to grow up with heart, not just titles. After her death, their childhoods changed forever. And a question echoed through time: who truly protected Diana? In those final hours, Diana was just beginning to live on her own terms. She had walked away from a life of performance, chosen love over convenience, purpose over prestige. But freedom, the very thing she fought for, remained a dream cut short. Her death cast a brutal light on society itself, the media that hounded her, the public that consumed every detail of her private life, the palace that let her suffer in silence. Everyone played a part. Diana wasn't destroyed by one moment. It was a lifetime of intrusion, judgment, and unmet expectations that wore her down. Diana had endured more pain than anyone should. Sleepless nights in palace rooms, the sting of betrayal, the pressure to smile for the cameras while her heart broke inside. And just when she began to reclaim her voice, she was silenced forever. In the final images before the crash, Diana smiles. She walks beside Dodi, perhaps dreaming of a new home, a quiet life. They tried to sneak out the back of the Ritz, away from flashing lights, but the very escape they sought became the trap that ended it all. And maybe that is the cruelest irony. A woman who gave so much love, empathy, courage never got to fully live. She wasn't just a princess. She was a mother with stem, a fighter, a survivor, and she was human. When Diana died, she didn't get the chance to write the ending to her story. But in a way, that story still lives on in the millions who remember her, in the causes she championed, and in the legacy she passed to her sons. And perhaps that's why the world still can't let her go. Because Diana wasn't just taken too soon, she was taken before she could be truly free. Princess Diana entered royal life with a pure heart, full of trust and a longing to be loved. But the very place that should have embraced her ended up hurting her the most. The pain she endured did not only come from the ruthless media or the weight of public expectations, but from the man she once loved and trusted. The silence, the emotional distance, and above all, the selfishness of the king shattered the heart of a young girl who had once believed that love could overcome all boundaries. Diana did not deserve a marriage built on lies. She did not deserve to be turned into a symbol just to cover up someone else's mistakes. And yet, despite betrayal, isolation, and unbearable pain, Diana held on to her compassion. She continued to love her sons fiercely, and she never stopped fighting for the voiceless. She passed away before she could fully live the life of freedom she dreamed of. But her story lives on in the hearts of millions. If you too feel the sorrow and injustice that Diana endured, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. Together, we will continue to uncover the truths hidden behind the velvet curtains of the British monarchy and ensure that Diana's voice is never silenced again.